Well, after the last episode's game-changing twist, we finally get a deeper look into the real story of Watchmen with one of its strongest episodes yet.
Don't change the channel, don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers.
Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for Watchmen Season 1, Episode 8, A God Walks into Abar, and holy shit, what an episode this was. And look guys, I knew something big was going to happen here, considering that we got that amazing twist in the last episode with, Cal being revealed to be John Osterman and all that kind of stuff. So we knew something game-changing was going to happen here. We knew we were going to get into the real crux of the story, but holy shit, this was so fulfilling. I mean, there's so much information that was packed in this episode. There's so much that we found out. We got so many little questions and things that we've wanted answered for a while, and just overall, this was such a satisfying episode of television that I really did adore quite a bit. So we're just getting into right now. So I think the first thing to talk about is really the characterization of Dr. Manhattan, because this is a character that can be very hard to characterize. You're basically trying to humanize a god, someone that is worshipped among so many people, and if you do it the wrong way, this could come across as really cheesy. But to be honest with you, I may have enjoyed this interpretation of Dr. Manhattan more than the one we got in the Zack Snyder film, and I adored that interpretation a lot. It was my favorite part of that movie, but oh my god, what they did here was so good because they really understood who Dr. Manhattan was. Yes, this is someone that is creating life, and yes, they understand that he's someone that, he's created these beings, Phillips and Crookshanks, who are molded after these two people that were really kind to him, but yet he wants more than that. He doesn't just want two people that are constantly just lavishing him with gifts and are constantly just giving him all these pleasantries. He gets tired of it after a while. He wants real love. That's what he wants. He wants real human emotion, and that is why he is tied to Angela in that way, and I thought they understood that so well here. I love the way that they really dive deeper into the relation between Angela and Dr. Manhattan. I thought they did a really great job with that there, and especially seeing Angela's, reluctance and that she wasn't as accepting of it at first. I like that it didn't take her too long to really get on board with what he was selling. I thought that that was a very effective moment for sure, and I also love the way they explored time, like how he can, how time is always different for him, whether it's him having a conversation with Angela, but he also is simultaneously having a conversation with her father, years ago, or he is talking to Angela in a bar, but he's also creating life in 1985. I just thought it was a really effective moment. They really understood that characterization very well, and I thought they did a really great job with that. Everything with, like, Europa, I thought they just hit the nail on the head perfectly. You really understood who Dr. Manhattan was just in those opening, 15 minutes alone. They did a really good job of establishing this character, but also how he doesn't really want to be a god. This is everything that he, everyone looks at him as one, but he wants to be human. That's what he wants to be. That's something that matters to him. And the fact that he sees this time, yes, he uses it to his advantage, but he also wants to be human that way because he has this huge lack of empathy for others, and that's something else that can be very hard to do, but the show wisely understands that this is just in his nature. This is not something that he can really fix. Part of the reason he wants to be human is because he wants those human emotions, because he naturally doesn't really have them. But I especially love the moment where we find out why he wanted this identity. But I like that we reveal that he didn't assume the identity of Cal because, he wanted to be human. He did it because he had to be. I mean, people knew of his identity. People were coming after him. He needed to protect himself in that way. And just seeing how long this has gone on for. I mean, we know that she and Cal have been in a relation for a while, but I did not anticipate that it was going to be, back in 2009, roughly 9 years, roughly over a decade that he has been in this body, that he has had his memories wiped. I can't imagine how that conversation must have been. I mean, if you're Angela in that situation, you have to act like you're not with this god, that you didn't witness all of this stuff. It's crazy to think about, but the show really pulls it off in selling this relationship here, and selling that even though Angela is a bit perturbed and just, she's a bit disturbed by the fact that he doesn't really seem to have much empathy towards this character of Cal, the actual Cal. She understands why he needs to do this, and it's that love that really does bring them together in that way. And that scene where, she has to put like the device in his head and things like that, it's really devastating stuff. You see, this is a guy who really reached out to her, and especially since we know what Angela has been through in Vietnam, that she was all alone, that she had to, go about this, all on her own. She's been in Vietnam for a while now. She's become this police officer in Saigon. It's been a really difficult road for her. And suddenly Dr. Manhattan comes along. They just have this really solid connection. And I just really love what this means for Angela as a character. She's no longer just some person that is, a relative of, obviously we already knew a lot about her, but this just makes her an even better character, I think, because now she has this connection to Dr. Manhattan. Now she feels even more, even though she's the main character of the story. I mean, we realize that this entire story has really been a love story in that way. Because Angela, we realize, and we knew this in the last episode, but even more so now, all of the stuff of her trying to protect her family, it's not just protecting her family, it's protecting Dr. Manhattan's legacy. She knows how important Dr. Manhattan is. She knows that she, as much as I think she's wanted to release that and she's wanted him to use his powers more, she knows he can't. She knows that if he even drops a hint of it, he's going to be exposed in that way. So again, while it does a really great job of getting you to understand Dr. Manhattan, it also makes Angela an even more interesting character in that way, because she's someone that has basically had to, conceal her identity, not just because of the fact that it goes back to what Lori was saying, that people wear masks, in an effort to protect themselves because they don't like who they are and things like that, which is similar to Dr. Manhattan. I mean, he doesn't like who he really is. He kind of wishes that he was, human in that way. He wishes that he was able to have emotions and all that kind of stuff. That's something that, he doesn't like, the fact that he's constantly creating life. He doesn't like the fact that time works differently for him. Yes, he uses it to his advantage, but he's frustrated by it. There are things that are just completely out of his control in that way. So I really like the fact that, this also really stems back to Angela, that she is protecting someone, not just because, she's trying to keep him from being exposed, but she knows this is who he really wants to be in that way. And so she's doing what she can because of her love for him, because of how much those two have this connection. I just think it makes for an even more stronger story. It's honestly really beautiful. And again, with any other writing, if Lindelof was not involved with this entire thing could go sideways. But again, just because of how on point his writing was here, and really diving deep into this character, which was kind of reminiscent of the single character focused episodes of The Leftovers, which a lot of this season has kind of felt like that. There's been at least 2 or 3 other instances this season where I've talked about that. But this very much did feel that way, and I thought it was a really, really great unpacking and exploration of these two and their relationship. And even smaller moments where, towards the end of this episode, when we realize that, he's telling her that she can't save him and things like that, you can tell she still wants to. She still has this undying love for him. Even though she hasn't seen him in his Dr. Manhattan form in a while, she's never lost that spark. She wants to do whatever she can to protect him in that way. And it's a really sweet moment, but it's also really devastating, because you just realize that this couple has had to live in secret, basically. They haven't been able to have that action. Cal doesn't know how they met. It now makes sense why Cal's memory is very foggy. While there's certain things that Angela doesn't want him to let out, that's why she was so concerned when he was talking to Lori. It wasn't because she doesn't want Lori to know. It's because of the fact that if he slips up about anything, people are going to start getting suspicious. And we already know that Lori is kind of suspicious. I mean, one of the big things in the PDpedia is, again, from last week, they looked at Cal Jelani's medical files, and they clearly do not line up with the Cal Jelani that is still alive. And I think that's very interesting for sure. And it definitely makes me interested in seeing if that's really going to go anywhere. Is this going to be a detriment? Because, I mean, Lori has been an ally up to to this point, but we also know that Laurie is someone who definitely knows Dr. Manhattan, and I think because of that, there might be a sense that maybe he is, she might still have that intuition that he is in fact Dr. Manhattan. I'm interested in seeing maybe where that's going to go. However, the other big thing that really makes this a big episode for Angela as well is this huge revelation we get with Will, because a big part of the season has very much been about Judd. How even though Angela knows that Judd was involved with some pretty terrible stuff, she still has that connection. She still has this admiration for him because those two did have a really good friendship in that way. We know that he's someone that depended on her when she was going through a difficult time, when she was injured and she couldn't be a cop anymore. Who was the person that was there for her? That was Judd. That's how these two started this friendship. So she's not just going to let go of that. So the revelation that she is basically the one that got Will to know about Judd's existence is a devastating moment, and you can really feel the agony in Angela at this point. I've heard people say, oh, they didn't make this clear enough. I think it's pretty clear. Angela killed Judd. Like, honestly, Angela's the one that killed him. Maybe not literally, but she's the one that got Will to know. And this is where they present Dr. Manhattan's time abilities as both a advantage and a disadvantage. And an advantage with the stuff with Adrian, which we'll get into in a bit, but it's a disadvantage in this sense where this completely ruined things for Angela. And this was something that Dr. Manhattan sensed back in their meeting, that something terrible was going to go wrong. And one kind of has to wonder, what would have happened if Angela never told, John about this? What would have happened if that didn't go down, if they never had that conversation, if she never brought this up to him? Or was it inevitable in that way? I kind of feel like it was inevitable. Like, there wasn't really a way to prevent it. The way that Dr. Manhattan was saying it especially felt that way. He knew that something like this was eventually going to happen. He knew that him being in Cal's body was only a temporary situation. He knew that this wasn't going to last forever, unfortunately, and eventually things were going to crumble for them. But I think the reveal that Angela is basically the catalyst for everything really changes the entire fabric of the show. Up to this point, we've all tried to figure out, what could have caused this. How did Will know? This solves every single plot hole. This answers every single question. I don't want to hear anyone say, oh, how can Will possibly know about the clan robe and things like that? Now there is no skepticism. It wasn't a pure coincidence. It wasn't because he knew his father. We were just simply looking too deep into it. In reality, it was all a coincidence. Angela just happened to reveal to Will, and I don't think it's too much of a coincidence either. I think it makes perfect sense that, Dr. Manhattan has this weird perception of time. He was talking to Will. Angela wanted those answers, but this was a Will that didn't even know who Judd Crawford was. He didn't even know at this point that Angela was his daughter, or his granddaughter in that way. So just this reveal, it just makes things so much more interesting. And I'm really interested in seeing where Angela's going to go from here, because she's definitely going to feel like she is at fault here. And I feel like she's going to want to do a lot of repentance for this. I think she's going to want to take the heat for this. And I'm interested in seeing really where that's going to go. Because again, even though we've seen Judd portrayed as someone that was seemingly a good guy, but clearly had a much more, I think, sinister agenda, that doesn't change the fact that him and Angela still had this really rock solid friendship. And to know that she's the one that basically destroyed it, and she's the one that killed him in that way, is a crazy thing to think about, but it really does work for this show. And I think it was probably maybe the most effective moment of this entire episode. And it also kind of goes back to the idea of the grandfather paradox, where if you don't know what that is, it's this idea where, you go back in time and you kill your grandfather, so you're never born in that way. But this is different, where she talked to her, her grandfather knew about this thing, so it ended up doing something much later in her life that she didn't even know was a thing from someone that she didn't even know that she had any interaction with before. It's just, it's insane to think about. It's something that only Watchmen could really pull off, and the fact that they were able to do something just insane like this, I think is amazing. I think they pulled it off flawlessly, and it's Regina King's performance. I mean, again, as much as she's great in the showier moments, it's these quieter moments where she doesn't really get to react, where you can just tell how much she feels it. She feels like she killed Judd, even though she might not have literally killed him. She feels the guilt. She feels like all of what she's been searching for has led to nothing, basically. It's all just gotten her back to this point, and I feel like she feels like she's never gone on this journey. Every single thing she's done in this season has involved Judd in that way. It's all gone back to Judd's death, and knowing that she's the thing that caused it, it just changes the entire dynamic of the show, and I just really love what it ended up doing here. But with all of that out of the way, which I mean, there's definitely was a lot to get into there, let's talk about all the stuff with Adrian, because that has been the one part of this series that I just didn't really know how they were going to wrap up. He has been so disconnected from the story, and we knew eventually he would, come into play somehow, but I just didn't really know how they were going to do it in 2 episodes. But from the looks of this episode, I think they're going to be able to pull it off. Again, I haven't seen the finale yet. I know I'm very behind, but I'm going to watch the finale finally and see how they pull it off. But considering the way they do things here, I really like the choice that they made. I especially love that we get to see this conversation between Dr. Manhattan and Adrian, and also that it goes on for a little more than like 10 minutes. Like, this is not something you'd normally see, and that's why I love that this show's on HBO. I love that Damon Lindelof is the one helming this show, because he's doing so many things that other TV shows would be scared of doing, and this is a perfect example of that, having this conversation go on for a very long time. But it really gets us to understand both Dr. Manhattan and Adrian, how even though these two are very different in that way, Adrian is someone that is clearly this leader, but yet nobody knows of the things he's done. Nobody really seems to care. While he has gotten credit for it, he doesn't really feel like he's gotten the credit that he really does kind of deserve in that way, which is really interesting. Um, we also see, though, that the big part of this is that he's now, like, isolated himself because of this, because, again, people don't know of the things that he's done, and I like that we find out that he's the one that was, stuck in Antarctica and things like that. But it really showed, I think, both the differences, but also a lot of similarities between the two. And both of their stances here are very clear. We see that Adrian's a man who feels that he should be rewarded. He should be adored by crowds because he saved the world from this nuclear disaster, and only, Manhattan and a few other countless individuals know about it. And so he feels very alone. He feels like he's had to hide this secret for years now. This is something that, yeah, they have had to cover up for a while, and I really love the way we explore the dynamic between the two, because on any other person, Adrian would be the smartest man in the room. But when you have someone like Dr. Manhattan, that's this god, this is someone that kind of challenges him in that way. So there's a lot of tension there, but there's also a lot of understanding between the two. You can see that Adrian can understand similarly what John is experiencing. They're both going through this profound sense of loneliness, but not because of the fact that they don't have anyone. But I think something we've seen in something that this very much confirmed is that Adrian's arc directly echoes that of Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan wanted to find actual love from someone, not just someone that would worship him constantly. He wanted something genuine in his life. That's why he turned to Angela. Whereas Adrian is similar to that, where he wanted someone to care for. He wanted someone to love him. And Dr. Manhattan, he proposes this idea that, look, on Europa, I created these two individuals that are the kindest people you'll ever meet. All they'll do is they'll want to worship you. They'll constantly, just lavish you with all these gifts. I mean, we've known what Mrs. Crookshanks and Mr. Phillips have done, but it's artificial. It's not real. It's just constant. And we can see how this has annoyed Adrian. He doesn't like the fact that they are constantly, that they are doing the same things over and over again. He doesn't like the fact they don't show emotion. He doesn't like the fact that they're so obedient in that way. If anything, he wants to get out of there. So you see, this is not something that Dr. Manhattan did to punish him. He did this because Adrian himself kind of agreed to it. But he also gave Dr. Manhattan the device to conceal his identity. So there's a lot of understanding between the two. I really love the way we unpack this dynamic here. It gives Adrian, similar to Angela, a much bigger purpose in the story. And again, the whole show, I mean, is really, again, changed because of this one reveal. And this scene very much does underline that as well. And I really loved what we ended up seeing there. And I love the way that Dr. Manhattan, again, he made Adrian feel like this was his goal. But what Adrian didn't realize is that he was going into a literal prison. These are two people that are going to be really annoying. They're going to get on his nerves. They're going to, and it makes sense why things have been really cartoony up to this point, because they're not real. They're clones that were created because John thought that it would be a good idea. He thought that he could create life, but the life he created, was one that wasn't real, and that's something that he failed to mention to Adrian. So it shows that even though these two have this really good understanding of each other, Manhattan knows what kind of person Adrian is. He knows that Adrian is not a good person. He knows how narcissistic he is. He knows that Adrian's someone that is responsible for a lot of the damage that they've gone through, and that he wants to credit himself. And it's just a really great way of showing how Dr. Manhattan is always one step ahead in that way. And I really loved getting to see that here. I love that we find out that, you know, he already knew about Will, and he knew about a lot of the stuff that was going down. It just overall makes for a really compelling scene, and probably one of my favorites in the entire episode. And I mean, Jeremy Irons and Yahya Abdul-Mateen III, who did such an incredible job, having such a monotone performance, but still brings so much emotion to it. I thought just did such an incredible job here. I love the dynamic between the two. I wish we would have gotten to see more of it, but of what we saw here, it was definitely just enough, and it was a great throwback, I think, to the original story. It kind of brings it back to its roots in that way. These are two men who directly oppose each other, but yet they really do understand each other, and because that, they kind of fear each other in that way, and I really did love getting to see that here. And once again, my dumbass forgot to leave out a very crucial scene that happens at the end of this episode. So this was really the first episode of Watchmen where we actually did get some form of a post-credit sequence, and I really loved it. I think what they did a great job with here is that now that we know why Adrian has gone to Europa and things like that, but also just how much of an annoyance the Crookshanks and Phillips have been to him, we now get to see what's really going on here, because we know he had that trial. We know that they basically said that he was guilty. So now he has to go through this ridiculous ritual where basically every single clone is asking him if he's going to stay. And unless he says yes, they basically smear this like raspberry pie in his face. It was a really, really weird turn of events, but again, it shows how much Adrian is suffering. You kind of wonder, like, is this what Dr. Manhattan wanted to do? Like, was he doing this as a way to make Adrian suffer because he knows of, you know, what Adrian's really done? Obviously, yeah, he does know what Adrian's really done, but I think it's pretty clear that this kind of shows that yeah, he did this to him to suffer. But we also get a little bit more into the Game Warden. We find out that he was actually the original clone. He was the original one that, John made, recreating the people that housed him and his father during, you know, the Holocaust and things like that. And it's a really interesting moment because you see how he talks about how, you know, he wants to be loved and how much that matters to him. But you also see how much he is angry at Adrian because Adrian doesn't show him that love and affection that he really feels like he deserves. And Adrian at this moment, he feels like he finally has an opportunity. You know, he's delivered this cake, he's now behind bars, but he knows he has this horseshoe, and with this horseshoe, he begins to dig his way out, and it very much seems like he's gonna get out of here this time. It seems like this might actually work out. Yes, the game warden is always in the way, but I think this could actually work out this time. There's definitely a possibility there. I mean, and I like that he talks to the game warden about how, his home is Earth and that everyone wants him to return and things like that. But the game warden he doesn't care. He wants him to stay. And again, it just shows where both of them are. And again, seeing the history throughout this whole episode, it just makes the scene so much more riveting. We know why the game warden cares so much about Adrian staying, but we also know why Adrian feels it is his duty to leave, because he feels like if he leaves, he can finally get that credit. He can finally be with people that actually recognize what he's done and things like that. This is something that's very important to him, and I just really love the way this was wrapped up. Jeremy Irons did such an incredible job in this final scene, and I cannot wait to see the way things play out there. It was absolutely incredible. So, yeah, obviously there's a lot of stuff to really unpack here, but getting into the technical stuff, I mean, this is Damon Lindelof, I think, in top form, similar to other episodes this season, but he just really gave it his all here. I love the more intimate feel this episode really had. This really did feel not like an origin story for Dr. Manhattan, because we know who he is. It just felt like an expansion of the character. Like, you could take the Watchmen comic and then watch this, and I don't think anything would feel lost in that way. I don't think anything would feel like you're missing something. I think they did a really good job with getting us to understand this character, because again, there are people that haven't read the Watchmen comics. I myself have not read the comics. I've seen the movie and I know the general source material, but I am not all that familiar with the actual comic. And I feel like they did a really good job of getting us to understand Dr. Manhattan, but also show the relationship between these two. All of that was just so well done, and was done in a really emotional way, and I just thought the directing was so great here, but it was the screenplay that the teleplay to this episode was so good. But it was the teleplay to this episode that I just thought was so fantastic, because not only was the writing so on, but was the dialogue so great. Just the writing itself, I mean, there's so many themes of isolation, there's so many themes of abandonment, there's so many themes of loneliness, but it really does bring all of these characters together. All the choices that they've made are suddenly making a lot more sense now. The reveal with Will works so well because we've had so much time to focus on Angela and her wanting those answers and her not getting those necessary answers. And even when she knows that Will is the one that killed Judge, she still had a lot of answers. And so to know that she's the one that did it, it kind of goes to the idea of, like, when you're looking for answers, when you're so adamant about it, you'll find out something you don't want to. And that's kind of what happened to Angela here. She was so hung up on what could have happened to Judd that she found out something that's going to fundamentally change her as a person, knowing that she was basically the sole reason for every single thing that happened in the show. I can't imagine how that's going to affect her moving forward. But again, she doesn't really have time to react to it either, because of the fact that the 7th Cavalry took John in that way, and it seems like the operation is still going on. He's basically accepting his fate at this point, but we know Angela is not going to go down without a fight, and they just did a really great job with establishing the relationship between the two, and also some really great comedy as well. I like that they really play up just how weird Dr. Manhattan can be. Him, like, the way he talks, and him showing up naked to Karnak, and him just being so fascinated by the different ways to make eggs. I mean, just stuff like that was so great, and I really love the dialogue here so much. It was easily one of my favorite, probably some of the best writing in this entire show so far. The cinematography for this episode was so on point. I heard so many people saying, oh, Dr. Manhattan looks like shit and things like that, but I mean, when he's still looks like Cal, obviously he's going to look a little off. That's not how he normally looks. And yes, out of context, it might not look great, but I think in context, it works perfectly. I think they did a really great job with it. And for a television budget, it looks fantastic. Karnak, especially, that scene, looked like it could just be right out of a movie. I mean, they did a really great job with that for sure. It looks so visceral in that way. And I really did love that. The scenes on Europa, I thought just looked beautiful, and the classical score that looms throughout this entire episode, I thought was just perfect. It really gave that godlike feel to Dr. Manhattan, and even though this is someone that they're trying to get us to humanize, he still is very much a god in that way, and I think they did a really great job with that here. Just everything about this episode, this is the kind of episode that I have loved about the show. This is the kind of episode that shows why I adore Damon Lindelof as much as I do. I know I've touted him a lot in the past few weeks, but I mean, he's one of the greats. He's one of the greats, and when he's doing stuff like this, you can very much see why. When he's on full cylinders, I mean, they do a really great job with that here. This feels like the episode that the show has been building up to. It really is setting up for what is sure to be, I think, an insane conclusion for sure, because now we have a lot more context into what's going on with Adrian and things like that, the relation between Angela and John. Everything just feels so much more sincere now. Everything just feels so much more well fleshed out, and I think moving forward, we're about to get a really incredible finale, and I cannot wait to see how that is going to play out. This was easily one of the best episodes of Watchmen so far, and I'm definitely going to give this episode of Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 8, A God Walks into Abar, overall in A+. Again, guys, I apologize for this review being so late, but I just really haven't had the time to do this review because I knew I was going to gush about this episode. I knew I had a lot to say, and I just wanted to wait. But now I can finally watch the finale, which I have been endlessly waiting for. I'm very excited to see how this is going to play out. I really don't know how they're going to end this. I know that this is probably going to be the only season, so I don't really know how that's going to be, but we'll have to see. I'm hearing really great things about it, so that definitely gets me really excited to see how it all turns out. But either way, guys, so for my review of this episode of Watchmen, let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.